Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everybody. Welcome again. I'm your host, Preacher Moss. This is the ShOUT Show. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is our Throwback Thursday, and I thought this Thursday would be interesting, if you will, if we could actually spend a little bit of time on something that's a little bit more relatable. Yesterday, I think for the whole week, we had quite a week. We had King's Holiday. We talked about a lot of things yesterday. Do we need to separate from America as we know it? And today I wanted to reach back because I've been reading some things in terms of the economy. You know, I've been really hard about, hey, with this whole pandemic thing, please make sure that you're paying attention to your own finances. So today I thought it'd be interesting for us to talk about some of the aspects that face us, some of the challenges we deal with in terms of our finances. So I wanted to spend this little bit of time. I know it's Thursday, but I want to spend this time talking about, dealing with financial debt. I wanted people to understand that, the debt is not just you, it's me, it's a whole lot of people. In the pursuit to get education, in the pursuit to get homes and cars and take care of our families and our parents, we accrue debt. Now, the thing is, do you accrue debt to the point where it is debilitating for you to be able to do other things? Is it crippling your future and your ability to move forward? Is it crippling your family's future? That's going to be a little bit of the impetus of today's show. And I don't mean to be in a scary thing. It's a historical understanding of why we have debt, why we have different classes, the millennials, we have Generation X, we have Generation Z, we have the baby boomers. Debt has been around as long as people have wanted things and couldn't have enough money to buy them. Don't feel special. I don't feel special. You have debt. I have debt. That's not the point, brothers and sisters. It is, how do we take this process of money? For a lot of us, this process of money that in some regards make us slaves to the debt process, that it doesn't allow us to move around. I'm going to bring in some different ideas about debt, and then I'm going to talk about what we deal with at our level. Because it's interesting what happens at the higher levels doesn't necessarily permeate down to the lower levels. And I'm not talking about how, the programs and the breaks and the tax credits and all. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the philosophical differences of how people handle their money. So I'm going to introduce some ideas like restructuring. I'm going to introduce some ideas like ratings. I'm going to do some ideas. We're going to talk about credit reports, credit scores, and things like that. And I hope in this brief amount of time that I have with you, that you so generously spend it with me, that we begin to talk about how it is we get from point A to point B, with point B being the impetus that we're being in a better position for our own financial welfare and wellness, brothers and sisters. Because it's been shown that debt is not the same as poverty. You do have debt in poverty. Poverty is something different. And I want to make sure that I emphasize that, because poverty has a lot of pockets outside of just debt. Debt is the financial, nomenclature of how we assess ourselves in terms of our ability to pay bills, our ability to save money, our ability to invest in things, not necessarily in the stock market, but you invest in things. You might invest in your children's education. You might invest in your parents' welfare and their later life. Part of it is you may have a situation whereby, you will find yourself, like a lot of people, like myself, you have to make sure that you are holding on to enough money to make sure that if something will befall your parents, that you had a rainy day fund. So I want to thank you guys for joining me. I'm going to ask you in advance, please defer and show your brother a little bit of patience. I don't have it exactly the way I want, because, all these ideas are running around. I'm even going to talk about my story about debt and how I got into debt, if you really want to hear it. And it has to do a lot with being a comedian. So without further ado, I thank you for joining the show. We're going to be right back. Stick in there. We're going to be talking about financial debt. You know why? Because being broke ain't no joke. Preacher Moss, SOS. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get this up here. I want to give you guys just a little bit of a shout out before I get to that. Before I even get into our speech, I want to thank everybody for joining us again. Let's go ahead and get our family, our Shout Out Show family, our stars in the building, get them coming through. And we're going to go ahead and get into our subject of the day. Let's go ahead and get them out here. We got Sister Ree, who's saying, hello, family. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Sister Ree, we know we love you. Thank you so much for coming on the Shout Out Show. Who, I tell you, Hall of Fame. I'm going to give Hall of Fame shout outs to our Shout Out Show family one day. We're just going to have a show. We celebrate you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate you, Ree and Derek and Juwan. Next up, we got Johnny L. Thomas. JT could probably jump in here because my brother is he's a certified public accountant. He knows going through the things he tells me about accounting and finance and debt and things like that are things that stay with me for the last, I got to say, at least 30 years, just trying to make sure that we make good decisions of how we secure money and secure funding, and we'll make sure we're able to take care of our bills and our families. And if our families want to engage in things that they feel are, good investments moving forward, that's what we do. That's how we pay our bills. All right, JT, nice to see you on the show. Give a shout out to the Thomas family, standing strong. All right, next up. Wa alaikum assalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Brother Altaf, good to see you, man. Good to see you on the Canadian side of the game and on the Canadian side of the border, Mr. 6 o'clock, our Canadian ambassador. Brother, thank you so much for joining the show. I hope that I can keep it tight on the right side so you can talk about this thing with your folks on the side of the border, talking about financial debt. My main man. Next up, we got Sister Ika coming all the way from Depok, Indonesia. How you doing, Sister Ika? We appreciate you joining the show. Peace and blessings to you and your family in Indonesia. Make sure you tell the people in Indonesia that the Shout Out Show is going strong. We appreciate you. Wa alaikum assalam rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Next up, we got my main man, Bilal Salahuddin. Wa alaikum assalam rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. What's going on, soldier? We appreciate you, man. I'm telling folks, boy, if people came to the masjid like people come to the Shout Out Show, boy, the world would be a different place. That's just what I'm saying. Bilal, shout out to Sister Sonia Salahuddin Dalton. I'm just giving shouts out all the way. Next up, we got Brother Erk in the house. Brother Erk, my main man. For white people, that'd be Eric. Brother Erk, thank you so much for coming on the show. Wa alaikum assalam rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brother. Good to see you in the house. Next up, my main man. This is Jelani Locks, what we call him Mark Candidate in government interrogations. What's going on, Brother Mark? We love you, man. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Shout out to the Candidate family and your queen, Sister Tina. My main man, he's a political operative, a political powerhouse down in Virginia Democratic politics, and a good guy to boot. My main man, Mark Candidate, what we call him Jelani. Good to see you on the show, Op. Next up, and we got our consultant producer, Sister Satana Whitfield, making sure that it works. And whenever I say Satana, I'm going to say get about you, get like Satana, thank you so much for coming on the show. And she makes this thing work, brothers and sisters. Yesterday, we had a great show, and I hope you guys get to check it out. I watched that show with the one error with the camera, with the new camera. It was a good show. I appreciate it. I would encourage everybody to look up, again, Wallace versus Brewer, the case of the black Muslims who bought property in St. Clair, Alabama, 375 acres, with the whole idea literally of establishing a black nation away from American politics, away from American pressure, racism. I don't know if they knew they were in Alabama, but with 375 acres, if people come to pressure, they gotta come look. So these brothers did that, and I think that inspired me actually for this talk today. All right. Let me begin this process by saying debt is something that we deal with. Debt is not something that has reappeared. It's been around since the intentionality of possessing something. It's been around since the idea that I see that, but I don't have the means to possess it. Debt is the imagination saying, oh, if I just had $5, $2, and the reality is you don't. So we make compromises. Not that debt is a bad thing. This is a track of our spending habits. This is a track of course, what we consume. We are a nation and a people of consumption, so these things are going to happen. Everybody can't have what they want when they want, where they want it. So every once in a while, you will accrue debt. Myself, brothers and sisters, I was a school teacher for quite a number of years. And I floated along. My story of debt was I didn't want to do this particular job anymore. I wanted to be a comedian, but to be a comedian, this is a free market. Brothers and sisters, there aren't any times where you start, you don't go in at 9 and leave at 5, and it's a very gray area. And what happened was, for me to be a comedian, I had to take on aspects of debt. That I moved from something that was a little bit more firm in terms of employment and stability, and I took a chance. Many of us get into debt because we take a chance. Now, let me frame the chance. Now, this is not a big chance. You say, well, if I buy this, I'll pay. And they always give you the terms of, they'll tell you if you can take this and you'll pay for it for 36 months, and it sounds feasible. We do that. But there is a difference. Here's where it gets sticky. It gets sticky because the relevance of debt has become more and more prevalent with our younger generation. Okay? My parents were baby boomers. Baby boomers had the opportunity to grow with technology. As things rolled out, TVs, radios, stuff like that, they had technology. And there was also a social undercurrent that made appliances and things like that once available just to one group of people. Now, technology, manufacturing, the manufacturers realized that we have to open up the floodgates to make this thing work. Accessibility is the thing I'm talking about. And for a lot of African Americans, Latinos, and people who are traditionally oppressed, access to appliances, access to funding was a very new thing. Getting housing was a very new thing. I told people back when we talked about King in late 1960s, King was still arguing about what? Open housing in Chicago, because people didn't have that access. So my parents and my parents' parents, they bought homes, but it wasn't the way you normally do. Like my grandparents didn't have loans. You had to figure out something. You paid an exorbitant amount of money for a house you overpaid for. Parents, we all do it, and I do it as well. So that's not the thing. My thing is with Generation X, my generation, we had a lot of distractions. TV, exposure to commercials, exposure to cable, exposure to the 80s, the 90s, the consumerism. My generation, brothers and sisters, and you'll hear about this in a little clip I'm going to play, but my generation, brothers and sisters, was the first group that had to go through, of course, the Great Recession in 2007, 2008, and we had to go through the pandemic. So we're double dipping. However, what's really, really hard is that we had some bellwether stops in there, and it allowed us to kind of regroup. One thing we didn't deal with back in the day was we didn't deal with large amounts of student debt. I can remember my first credit card. It was the American Express card. I don't know why they sent it to me. I filled it out. The young lady said, this is a credit card. It's good for you. I don't know. I'm like, all right, she said it's good for me. And I just paid off that credit card last week. I've had it since 1987. No, I'm just kidding. I am joking, but there are people who've held on to credit and been having to pay off credit for a long time. But debt is different, brothers and sisters. Debt is how do we move it. Now, I referred to this earlier at the top of the show. I said a lot of times, we don't understand debt. We understand debt as it's presented to us as something it's a character evaluation. If you can't pay your bills, there's something wrong with you. Now, this happens with African Americans. If you can't pay your bills, all of a sudden you lazy and shiftless. If you can't pay your bills, there's something wrong with you. Your mama ain't raised you right. And so we run and put things on layaway and stuff like that. These are interventions to make sure that we stay in debt, brothers and sisters. But then I read this book called Things Will Be Different. And I read this thing about sovereign debt. And I realized how countries deal with debt. And the way they deal with debt, sovereign debt, is they don't ever pay their bills. What they do is they simply restructure to debt. They restructured debt. They repackaged the debt. I tried this one time. Several years ago, I got so excited. I called up my credit card company. I felt like they had given me an exorbitant rate, a slave rate. I called them up. I said, hello, my name is Mr. Moss. They said, hello, this is Visa. I said, listen, Visa, this is Mr. Moss. I feel, as a grown black man, that you have me on a plantation rate. They said, excuse me, sir. I said, you have me on a plantation rate. You are treating me like a sharecropper. I said, I only have enough room on my credit card to get a bale of cotton. The lady said, sir, that's not true. My point, brothers and sisters, was through this whole foolishness that I was throwing out, she reduced my rate. So I went from 21% to 14%. Big difference. So I would encourage everybody to understand this space about that and why we have problems. And I don't want to say generation. My generation is actually called generation debt. Because we took on things like houses, we took on things like taking care of our parents and stuff like that. And a lot of people that came after us, Generation Z, the millennials, they don't even have that opportunity because they're dealing with larger aspects of debt according to consumption. So I'm going to show you this thing. Sister Tana, can we set it up, please? She just popped back in. I'm going to show you this and we're going to be right back.
The same forces that are driving massive inequality between the top 1% and the rest of us are creating a vast generational wealth gap between baby boomers, my generation, and millennials. Millennials aren't teenagers anymore. They're working hard, starting families, trying to build wealth. But as a generation, they are way behind. They're deeper in debt, only half as likely to own a home, and more likely to live in poverty than their parents. If we want to address their problems, we need to understand those problems. Number one, stagnant wages. Median wages grew by an average of 0.3% per year between 2007 and 2017, including the Great Recession, just as millennials were beginning their careers. Before that, between the mid-1980s and mid-1990s, wages grew at 3 times that rate. Second, as wages have stagnated, the costs of essentials like housing and education have been going through the roof. Millennials own fewer homes, the most common way Americans have built wealth in the past. Education costs have soared. Adjusted for inflation, the average college education in 2018 cost nearly 3 times what it did in 1978. 3. And as a result of all of this, debt. That expensive college education means that the average graduate carries a whopping $28,000 in student loan debt. As a generation, millennials are more than $1 trillion in the red. In addition, the average young adult carries nearly $5,000 in credit card debt, and the number is growing. Fourth, millennials are finding it harder than previous generations to save for the future. Among Fortune 500 companies, only 81 sponsored a pension plan in 2017. That's down from 288 20 years ago. Employers are replacing pensions with, essentially, do-it-yourself savings plans. All of this means that fewer millennials are entering the middle class than previous generations. Most have less than $1,000 in savings. Many young people today won't be able to retire until 75, if at all. If we don't start trying to reduce this generational wealth gap through policies like debt relief, accessible health insurance, paid family leave, affordable housing, and a more equitable tax code for renters, millions of young Americans will struggle to find financial security for the rest of their lives.
So you kind of get the point. It's a very short, succinct clip, but you kind of get the point of what people are dealing with presently, but what people have been dealing with for quite a long time. One thing that they didn't say in that presentation is the availability of funds and resources, equity, liquid capital, things like that to people of color. Because people of color actually constitute a lot of what he was talking about. He's talking about youth will fall into poverty and things like that. The young people, there are elderly who grow into poverty, who retire, for lack of a better word, into poverty. Not something that I like to talk about, but we have to be honest. This could happen to any of us. Thus, I would encourage brothers and sisters to, when you talk about debt, understand that it is the cost, if you will, if we're going to have a pivot. Debt to me was like, oh, I can't do this, I can't do this years ago when I was young. But then debt was something I framed that I'm going to incur this if I take this money and try and do something different with it. So I stopped leaving money in the bank because it earned money in the bank. It earned interest in the bank, REBA, whatever you want to call it. But it wasn't a lot. It wasn't the same as if I actively took my money and looked for different places to apply it. If I had $200, brothers and sisters, I learned that if I leave it in the bank, essentially, that money's going to get eaten up. What I mean by eaten up is the opportunity cost of leaving it in the bank are way greater than if I took it out and I applied it to different places. That you can take money, brothers and sisters, and this is important. We're going to talk about being broke and a joke. Creatively, brothers and sisters, creatively, we can take our money, and guess what? $100 or $1,000 goes a long way when you're dealing with people who don't have that much, and they deal with credit. I say credit is from the devil. Yes, it is. Credit frames all of us. Credit is the reason why you can't get a house sometimes. Credit is the reason why if they give you a house, they give you a bad loan, or you get a bad loan, or you get a car, but the car isn't right, or you get a student loan and it's absorbing it. Because the devil is in the details. That's why they say that the devil is in the details. But my point, brothers and sisters, is if we were to conscientiously remove ourselves from the conversation about debt and look in the peaks and valleys and say, where are the opportunities? Let's be honest, debt is a business. When people loan you money, and I've had, I've done this a couple times where I've borrowed money, but I didn't keep the money. I borrowed money for a very, very short time and turned it around and gave it back to the person. We have to get into the space that we use other people's money to make us money. That we use other people's money to make us money. That is, of course, the bane of black existence, that everybody uses our money to make money and we don't even get money back. The hustle of a bank, brothers and sisters, because we take our money to the bank. Well, the hustle of the bank is the bank has the right, when you sign the paperwork, to invest your money. They have to keep a certain amount of money on reserve, but the government allows them about 3% to invest in whatever they want to. And imagine all of these accounts, how much money they have, the Chases and the Banks of Americas and the Wells Fargo, that they have this large accrual of money that they can use different places. Sometimes they do good things, sometimes they don't do good things, and we wind up having a housing crash. That's a whole nother story. But here's the thing I want you to believe. Folks count on you believing that debt somehow is a roadblock for you. You ever listen to big companies? All the big companies, you know what they function on, brothers and sisters? Debt. Debt. People say, oh, they don't pay anything in taxes. You know why? Because they write off their debt. And the difference between the company and the corporation is you're not a corporation. I'm not saying go out and get your LLC, but I'm saying please, please, please investigate and look at the processes around you of how people use debt. When people loan money to you sometimes, the bank loans money to you sometimes at a particular rate, you know what they're happy about? That you're going to pay that money off in 5 years. You know why? Because that's 5 years of interest. And you're going to be able to repay that loan off 3 or 4 times for them, just in interest alone. But you know what they don't count on? That you're going to restructure the loan on your terms. Maybe you say this loan is at, 12% or 10%. But I got somebody over here that's going to give it to me at 4%. And if your credit's good, you can take the 4%, you can write that off. And now, brothers and sisters, you have a little bit of money that you can invest in different things because you're not dealing with an interest rate. I think debt, brothers and sisters, is probably one of the most misunderstood things in the world. I look at countries that default on their national debt. I do. Places like Greece, A lot of countries default on their loans all the time. You think about Japan, brothers and sisters. Japan is so powerful. They have Toyota, they have technology, electronics, and all of that. But this is a country that got bombed. And people say, how did they go from that to being literally a superpower? And each and every time, they restructured their debt. And guess who helped them? The United States of America. So if the United States of America is going to help Japan, they're going to help Greece, they're probably not going to help you. But you can help yourself. Go over the terms of your debt. Pull your credit cards out and see which one is charging the most. Be your own debt collector or debt reducer in this case. Call credit card companies. They may not do anything for you, but I want you to get into that feeling that I do have control over my finances. You see, silence is complicity to these companies. You know, my cousin Jason, God, and that's my main man. You know, he's an entrepreneur, he's a man after my own heart. But I remember, brothers and sisters, in his little town of Danville, Virginia, he worked at a payday loan place. And the payday loan place is strategically placed between the grocery store, the liquor store, and one other food store or electronics store. So, and they would have people come into the payday loan place, which is basically a debt palace. And these people would come into the payday loan place and they would borrow $100 or $500 at a particular rate. And they would have to turn it in by the next week or 2 weeks. And they would sign these terms and, it'd be attached to your bank account. And it was interesting because they had the rates for the loans. And I remember for $500, the rate was 150%. And if you didn't bring it back, it would roll. It was compound interest, brothers and sisters. Now they got rid of the payday loan place because you know what? It started affecting black people who weren't black and affecting people who weren't poor. It started affecting the military, so they got rid of it. But here's my point, though. Think of the boldness and the arrogance to believe that you can get people to borrow money at this space. Now, there are a whole lot of economic factors, environmental factors, social factors, culture factors that we can go into about why that type of thing exists, brothers and sisters. I don't have that time. But I am going to ask everybody, understanding that being broke ain't no joke. You have to be informed. Because the one thing that debt can't take from you is the truth. The one thing that debt can't take from you is your ability to investigate your own situation. Because I found that debt outside of money is stagnant. You can move it around as much as you can. You know, during the pandemic, JT and I, and Satan and I, we were talking about how they moved debt around. People who had credit cards all of a sudden found that their credit card limits were slashed tremendously. I had a credit card with $10,000 on it, and it was slashed all the way down to $2,500. This is the difference of $7,500 of available capital, but it's in the contract. They're allowed to do that. They can take your money just like that. They can slash your credit. And I called the lady at American Express, and I said, what is this all about? And she started giving me the rigmarole about algorithms. And that's a whole nother story about debt, brothers and sisters. You're living your life through algorithms. Get that book, Weapons of Math Destruction. I can't remember the author. But we're living with algorithms that are now structuring and making sure that we stay in debt. I called this woman. I said, I don't understand. Pay my bills. I got a low rate on this card. I hardly ever use it. You guys cut my thing because all of a sudden none of us were working. And sadly, we had to look at the fact that maybe we have to take this credit card and pay for groceries, pay for property taxes, whatever it is you had to do. And the woman was telling me, and I said, lady, I don't want to hear it. I made a big fuss. I said, let me ask you a question. How much money would I have to pay so I get my credit limit back? And the lady stood there and she said, well, you can't do that. I said, don't tell me. And the lady said, it'd be about $420. I said, lady, you should have just told me that at the beginning. And I paid the $420, and they gave me my credit limit back. Now, there was a reason I did that as well, but it's just because when they slash your credit limit, it makes your credit usage rate go up. And then you get even more jacked up because now your credit score looks all out of whack. That's another story too. The point is, and I'll wrap up here because I don't want to go over. The point is, we do have power. Understand that there are certain forces out there that want to make sure that you stay in debt. And the way they want to make sure that you stay in debt is that you're not asking questions. You're tying it to your character and your emotions. No, it's strictly financial. And I would encourage everybody, and I will remind myself as I'm saying it to you, that we do have power because we do have the purposeful, taskful, and the beautiful concept of making decisions. All right. So we're going to go ahead and get back. We're going to give a shout out. Speaking of that, we're going to give a shout out to our sponsor, www.BeFinanciallyIndependent.com. Again, that's www.BeFinanciallyIndependent.com. You can call 202-508-3780. Again, that's 202-508-3780. Make sure you check that out. If you're worried about your finances, check it out. Next up, we want to give a shout out to Bayan Islamic Graduate School. If you are considering a quality level graduate education in Islamic Studies, Islamic Leadership, Islamic Education, or the Masters of Divinity program with a specialty focus in Muslim chaplaincy, you want to check them out. Go to bayanonline.org. Again, that's bayanonline.org. And we also want to give a shout out to our newest family member, ShOUT TV. Again, that's ShOUT TV. I tell people you want to check them out. We have some bumpers coming out. Sister Satana was gracious enough to help me cut some new commercials. You want to check out ShOUT TV because it's not so much ShOUT, it's We Are TV. We Are Muslim TV. I should rename and charge them a lot of money for that, Satana. I like the way that sounds. Okay. And we're going to get out here on a great note. So, listen, you guys have been great. We're going to bounce today. Shout out to Convenient Urgent Care. Again, that's convenienturgent.com. Again, that's convenienturgent.com. Fighting the good fight against Omicron, Delta, and COVID. I mean, brothers and sisters, this is a serious situation. I know people are saying that we've hit our peak and the numbers are going down, but we're not out of the woods yet. I hate when we say that. We know we're not out of the woods. Everybody gets excited. So make sure that you guard your health and guard the health of your family as well. Hope to see you guys on the show. Satana, roll it. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on a minute. Mark. Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. All right. Oh, no, that's Muhi. What's going on, Muhi? Assalamu alaikum. And Mark Sankofa. Mark always be doing that African stuff. I love it, but, you know, Mark, I can't remember that stuff, man. You got to, if you're going to put Sankofa, Mark, you got to put equal sign means. You know, I can't remember all that stuff. I can only remember like 2 days out of the Kwanzaa. Fujama and one other thing. So listen, appreciate you, Mark, for coming on the show. And like I said, give a shout out to your family. Satan, let's go ahead and take them home. I'll see you guys on Monday. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Have a great weekend. Preacher Moss, Shout Out Show. Hey, babies. Welcome to Radio WCUC, Convenient Urgent Care, home of the smart patient. This is DJ What It Do. You know what time it is. It's the top of the hour, and the request lines are open. You know what you want to hear. I know what you want to hear. Operators are waiting.
I just got to hear, don't get the COVID.
Don't get the COVID. Put your mask back on. The Delta COVID, more contagious than before. Don't get the COVID. Go on and get the vaccine. You know that it can keep you safe, and your people living up in your space. Don't get the COVID. You need to wash your hands. The Delta COVID is more deadly than before. Don't get the COVID. Go on and get your vaccine. You know that it can keep you from dying. Don't leave your family all alone and crying. Don't get the COVID.
We invite you to join our fight against COVID and against misinformation. It's time to listen to the doctors and trust the science.
When I think of people dying that don't have to die, it makes me sad.
Well, family, that's it for our show today. One of the reasons I felt compelled to make this video, because I noticed when an event is over, Muslims don't know when to leave. So if you're sitting there in front of your television going, that was fun, that was enjoyable, what do I do now? This is me telling you to leave. You know why? Because the show is over. I already left. I taped this before I made it. So you have permission to leave. And you also have permission to come back. To the Shout Out Show, we are Monday through Thursday. Again, that's 6 o'clock Eastern Time, 5 o'clock Central, and of course on the West Coast, 3 o'clock. So we want to thank you for coming on the show, my brothers and sisters. And guess what? This is yet another exercise for you to leave, because I'm out of here. Later.